thing as well. Hello and welcome to a late edition this week of the Property Experts podcast with myself, Ben Richards, and Jack Diggins. I am currently in Greece and Jack is currently in Peru. So to match times was quite difficult. But anyway, we are here now and we are looking forward to kicking off. And I wanted to actually kick off with a bit of a testimonial. Dan Borg, thank you very much for your comments on YouTube today. Hi, Jack and Ben. Thank you for creating this brilliant podcast. It's so valuable to hear the inner workings of your businesses and really enjoying listening back to your episodes. If that isn't a good start to an episode, then I don't know what is. So thank you very much, Dan, for that. And you have asked a question and we will answer it this week. So thank you very much for that. So on the agenda this week is the 10th of May, 2024, for those that aren't on YouTube. And we're going to be talking through social media. Do you need it? Lots of wide-ranging opinions on that, and we're going to be talking about our opinions. Point number 2, pre-planning advice. Is it worth it? You will find out the answer very shortly on that. 3, both XP directors are on holiday, and how do we communicate with our teams and keep the business running during that time? We're going to be giving some tips and tricks on how we do that later on. Some exciting site updates from our project in Marlow. Jack's going to be talking about making offers and leaving some in the tank, which I'm very interested to understand more about what he's going to be talking about on that. Going to be also talking about our Muswell Hill project update. Jack's also going to be discussing how he analyzes any business. I'm not really sure where he's going with that, but I'll find out. He's also been doing a lot of negotiating in Peru. I've been there myself. I know what it's like, so I'm interested to hear what he has to say. And then finally, I'm going to be talking about shareholders agreements, what they are and why you need them in your business. So over to the first question though, because Dan very much, what's that questions bit? Oh, it's gone. Anyway, we're going to be answering this following question first. So Dan has messaged, when buying a mixed-use building where the shop has been abandoned by the tenant for over a year and not kept up with bills, what due diligence would you do and what typically happens on completion? I guess there's a few things in there. Typically on completion, all of the bills that are outstanding will kind of cease to be your responsibility. Once you change ownership, typically what you would do is write to your utilities provider, say that you've now taken ownership, probably prove that you've taken ownership, and any bills that are outstanding before that point, the utilities provider will have to chase up the previous tenant previous owner, tenant, whatever it is, for the bills to be made good with them. So hopefully that answers that part of the question. What due diligence would I do? I mean, the fact that it's been abandoned, what else? What is there really to do other than the utilities being paid? Bills not kept up to date. What due diligence would you do? Yeah, I mean, I guess business rates is one thing, but again, that should take ownership with you. Sorry, chat's dropped out, so I'm just trying to get back in. What due diligence would I do? Yeah, the utilities thing really is I guess, not irrelevant, but fundamentally the previous owners, tenants should be paying those bills. What other due diligence would I do? Sorry about this. There we go. A few tech issues and me fumbling over my words. I basically just said utilities should just get passed over to the previous tenants. What other things would you do in terms of due diligence with a shop that's been abandoned as part of a mixed-use purchase?
Yeah, so evidently there's going to be issues if they're not in there paying rent. Do you really want them in there? So then it's going to be similar to what we did with our housing association. You basically want to make sure that you can get some form of deed of surrender in place to surrender the lease, or for them to get out of the lease. Realistically, if they're, for an example, a good business that's technically solvent and operating, you have the right to take them to court for what they're liable to be paying in the building, but it might be a better strategy for you to get it vacant. So I'd either look at them bringing them up to speed in paying rents, or getting a deed of surrender agreed before you actually exchange on the building, or core exchange with the condition that is in place, just so that you have flexibility and full control of the site.
Nice, very much more eloquent than I was when you were gone, because I was trying to sort out the tech and get you back in and all sorts of other stuff. So it's just a bit of a shambles. But hopefully that's answered some of your questions, Dan. If you've got any more, drop them in the comments below. If not, we can have a separate conversation outside of this if we haven't really explained ourselves very well. But on to point number 1 of this week's agenda. Do you need social media, Jack? This was one thing that you wanted to add. So I'm intrigued to understand where this question's come from and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so I think, there's a bit of a rabbit hole that I'll go down and explain more about it. And I do feel that some channels are better for different things, but a lot of people go out there and go, oh, social media is not really my thing. And then you have the opposite end of the spectrum of people that I think over social media. It'll be good to hear what, our listeners think of our sharings in our social media. We're just trying to create value in our platforms and focusing on our avatars. But the main reason this was driven forward is because in our boardroom session, it was a really hot topic. I feel that a lot of the people in our boardroom are doing a lot less social media to us. And I feel like we have to always explain and justify what we're doing and why we're doing it, which is great, and why our boardroom environment is great. But just to sort of touch on why you might need a social media platform. And the first thing I'm going to say is it's completely free. It's something where you can document what you're doing and build reputation, build trust, build engagement, build a brand. And that doesn't necessarily cost anything. And a prime example of that is someone like, KSI. He was one of the biggest social media influencers in the UK. He then went worldwide. He then partnered up with Logan Paul, and they brought out Prime energy drink. Now, the only reason that energy drink has done so well is because of their profile. So they can pretty much fold any business venture into their profile and do extremely well. And you see it across the board. If you look at Gordon Ramsay, his chain of restaurants, he was a semi-professional footballer, then he was a chef, then he went into restaurant ownership, then he went into a TV program. All of those personalities where they have more of I think it's a star profile, which if anyone's into their own sort of dynamics as a person or psychometrics testing, they excel extremely well. And that's also why, I don't know which Kardashian it is, but she was the first self-made female billionaire, and it's purely from her profile. And one of the reasons I wanted to touch on it is because, if you don't have a marketing plan in place, it's a good idea to think about it. We have certain businesses that we think are better off on LinkedIn. We have some businesses that we think are better off on TikTok. And it's all to do with the business plan. You don't necessarily have to be on all the platforms. You've got to think about who do you want to be communicating with, where do they consume, how do they consume, and what do they want to consume, and then what message and content you're putting over to them. Anything else to add, Ben?
Yeah, nice. I have 2 examples really where, for us, even those 2 cases have been worth the, like you say, free input and sort of free platform for us to get ourselves out there really. And one is somebody that saw us 4 years ago at one of the events that we sort of spoke at, was in the background watching what we were up to on social media, not necessarily lurking in the background, but we didn't really, know he was there or know that he was watching us, and didn't really contact us through that time. But 4 years later, when he was ready, it was a case of him reaching out and saying, look, I've come in some money. I've got £450,000 to invest. I saw you 4 years ago. I like what you've been doing on social media. I've been following your journey. Can I invest with you? It might have taken 4 years, but at the same time, it's been free to kind of build that profile and build that relationship with someone that actually we didn't talk to for 4 years, but he feels like he knows, likes, and trusts us because of all that process that he's gone through. So that's one example. And the other one that I wanted to talk about was, and I've forgotten it because there's so much noise in the background. Raising money and opportunity. So I haven't spoken to a lot of people from secondary school and university since leaving 12 years ago. Yet one in particular case, and this is just one that I remember, whereby unfortunately someone's grandma passed away. They were left a nice big house in Maidenhead, because they'd been watching me, since I literally hadn't spoken to this person since leaving university, and they've been watching what I've been up to on social media. I've been telling people what we've been up to, what we do, in property, into business. They messaged me and said, this property is now in our possession. Effectively, we don't know what to do with it. What can we do with it? And Jack and I potentially were going in on JV on this for like 9-unit conversion in Maidenhead, which at the time probably would have been like a £4 million gross development value deal. And that opportunity's only come about because they've seen what we've been up to on social media. So, in this day and age, you can't really ignore it. It is everywhere. If you're not scrolling through it, kind of getting absorbed into the content and doom scrolling, if you're on that side of it, you're not being the creator, you're not creating the opportunities, you're not benefiting from actually creating the content and getting yourselves out there. And you could either be one of two people, the person that scrolls or the person that creates, and the person that creates is always going to drive more value, create more opportunities. And sadly, whether you like it or not, it's here to stay and it's not going anywhere. So I absolutely think you do need to be on social media if you want to progress your business and create opportunities. If you're happy with your business and it's done okay for itself, and you got to a position where you have done without it, then fine if you're not looking to grow it. But if you're looking to grow something, I think it's fundamental.
Completely agree. I suppose a tip out there for anyone that is unsure of what to post, think about it more like documenting, and make sure that you have your avatar in mind of who is consuming that information. So for an example, Ben mentioned raising investment. Our avatar is like an Alan Sugar, we always say, successful business owner, wants a bit of diversification, doesn't have the time or the expertise to put in the efforts to do what XP are doing. And from reading, whether it be articles, watching interviews, watching these live at fives, going on LinkedIn, seeing our posts being reshared, that sort of 7-step process they say for a sale. I think with investments, it's probably more like 100 because it's a very high barrier for entry commitment. They're not buying a chocolate bar off us in the corner shop. They're doing a lot more than that. So just maybe think about who you want to communicate with. Maybe you actually want a customer, which is very different to us. We want an investor avatar, where you might want a customer avatar, and that has a very different communication process.
Yeah, one thing I would say is that you're probably not going to see us dancing around on TikTok anytime soon. But that does absolutely work for some people. But yeah, not us yet. Cool. On to point number 2, pre-planning advice. Is it worth it? Now, for those that haven't gone through this process before, it's part of the planning permission process or an option for you through the planning process. Effectively, what you're doing is packaging up a set of drawings and some information to submit to the council to get their sort of informal feedback on your scheme before actually submitting a formal full planning application or a permitted development application, for example. Now, historically, I've seen the weight in them. You'll probably get a guess from those that are looking on YouTube. For those that aren't, the big image that I put on the screen is "you're worthless," and that's really what I think about the pre-planning process nowadays. That it used to be a very useful application to run. The speed in which you get a response was very good. The type of information that you would get was useful, i.e., it gave you pointers as to what is likely to be accepted, what isn't likely to be accepted. The massing is too big, maybe shrink that down. I don't like the fact that there's 3 dormers on the roof, put 1 or 2 and we'd be okay with it. All of the feedback used to be very productive. We had a pre-planning advice application that took 6 months to get this week on our project in Tame, St Andrew's Court. I could have paid probably 1,500 quid to a planning consultant to write me a list of all the planning policies that I need to adhere to and the key things that I need to be thinking about within those policies that would have matched the pre-planning advice that we got back from the council. It was pointless. It was worthless. It didn't give us any real good steer into the development proposed within our drawings and the information that we provided. It was very, very generic, very high level. And to be honest, we've wasted 6 months. We've wasted whatever it was, 2 grand's worth of fees. I'd love to know what your thoughts are about the pre-planning process, whether you've had good advice or good responses, piss poor responses like us, which councils seem to give you decent advice, which councils don't. how long people have taken to give a response. I had a pre-application 2 years ago in Reading that took 10 months to get the written feedback. What normally happens is you meet a planning officer on site or you have a video call with them. They say some really good stuff and they actually give you some really good pointers face to face. But when it comes to the written response, it's like they've basically taken all the useful stuff out, just giving you this generic piece of paper that says, oh, see this policy, look at this policy, and nothing specific towards your development. So it's a bit of a rant. I know it is, but I'm just kind of fed up with the whole planning process, to be honest. I'd love to know what your thoughts are. But I think pre-planning advice is worthless. Jack, I guess you don't have to do too many of those.
I completely agree with you. I mean, we did one on Bessingley Road. I can remember one that we did on that corner plot in Nettlebed. I can remember the one that we did very succinctly in the police station in Sonning Common. And I've also had one done in Reading. And to compare them all, in the good old days, you would have a site visit and a report drawn up and a better idea if you get planning within a month, which is normally very useful because during that month of conveyancing and getting your searches and surveys together, you can really feed a bit more information out of the council. Now they're, like you said, template. What really pisses me off is when they do come on site and tell you one thing and then write up in the report something else, because I feel that, one, it's contrary to the visit, but also it kind of doesn't really help you. It kind of does the opposite. They kind of go, so on Bessingley Road, we're looking at getting a chalet bungalow in the garden. And on site, they in principle liked the look and sound of it. And then the report was extremely negative and actually probably 90% in favour of rejecting it. Whereas it was the opposite pre the site visit. So I completely agree with you. I think it's pointless. I think you're better positioned with a private planning consultant that's really good. Because at the end of the day, they're going to be the ones fighting the fight and throwing the punches with the planning officer anyway. So you might as well start the journey with them sooner rather than the opponent. Reading have got a terrible history of turnaround times. I've heard of some that even take longer than a year. So everyone just submits a full planning app because by the time you got the feedback, you might as well put a full planning app. But it needs to be changed. It's terrible and slow. But then again, I think the whole planning process, department, funding lines, resource needs to be reviewed because it's horrific how bad and slow it is.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point on the actually just submitting a full planning application. And within Aura, over the last 2 years, I know that we've persuaded some of our clients not to even bother with the pre-app and just submit the full application. Because one, they have a statutory deadline of 8 weeks. And I know that it normally goes over 8 weeks, but you have to give them extensions of time to go over that time. If they're going to reject it anyway, you may as well say, look, reject it within the 8-week period. Give me a list of all the reasons why you're rejecting it, because the feedback in that list is going to be far superior than the wishy-washy pre-planning advice that they give you. And actually, it's a formal, even if it's a rejection, it's a formal rejection that you can either appeal, and you could run the appeal in tandem to putting a new planning application in, or that decision notice and the officer's report is basically a checklist for you to look at and say, okay, well, they don't like this, don't like this, don't like this. Okay, how do we overcome those issues in our next full planning application? And even if you've gone through 2 applications, that's probably still faster than the 6 months response time of the pre-planning application on St Andrew's Court, for example. So yeah, I have been a lot of the time persuading clients not to even bother with the pre-app advice process. I know that a lot of the views on this are that it gets the planning officers back up because they've not seen an application before it lands on their desk as a full application. But to be honest, I think that's a bit of bullshit. I think maybe that would have been maybe true a couple of years ago, but I think that it's the way that the planning council departments are run now. People are in and out the door like a turnstile. I can't see any planning officers really being there long enough to even care whether it's hit their desk, before it's come in as a full plan application or not. So yeah, I think it's broken. It needs changing, but this is the world we live in. Cool. So these are the types of things that we talk about on our XP Boardroom. There are a couple of spaces left. I've actually got one of my previous employees that I think will be starting to join the Boardroom group over the next couple of months. It's a chance for property developers and investors that are either starting their journey or want to grow their business and scale it to 7-8 figures with us, with a room full of talented individuals from different backgrounds, learning about sales, marketing, finance, operations, and growing your team to help you deliver on your business goals. So if you're interested in joining the XP Boardroom, do send us an email or comment Boardroom below and we'll get in touch with you. Cool. So yeah, like I said at the start, I'm in Greece. Jack's in Peru. There's a lovely photo of Jack and Kelly in Rainbow Mountain. Is that?
Yeah, very correct.
Yeah, nice. And we just wanted to talk a little bit about how we've been communicating with our team when we're overseas in this modern day of technology. There's lots of things and tools and tricks that we use. So Jack, yeah, you wanted to bring up this topic. What were you thinking about this?
Yeah, I just think that when you're on a different time zone and when you're trying to chime into the team as and where you can, it's good for everyone to be knowing, what your day looks like. So for me, I'm 6 hours behind. So my team cannot expect to hear back from me until I'm awake. Coincidentally, the last few days, that's been very early because I've been getting up and doing a bit of work every morning. But it's to communicate that across the team so they know that if there's anything that they need to communicate with you, it's condensed into the period that overlaps working hours and when you're able to sort of come back to them. And also prioritizing things, because essentially if you want to talk about strategy or an event in 3 months or something that requires a lot of time, effort and consideration, that's probably not the conversation to be had while you're away. It needs to be the fast and sharp communication back and forth to get the day-to-day task over the line and helped with and moving forward. And what I always think is there's certain things that we don't want to be holding up in the business. And then I'm talking about real growth stuff that could take a backseat for a week while someone's away. We're massive advocates for WhatsApp. We've got WhatsApp groups with various different peoples in each organization. We think that they're amazing for quick fire communication. If you don't have WhatsApp in your business, I don't know how you operate it, quite frankly. I know that there's other options that you can use, such as
Slack.
Slack, that's it.
Slack's one.
Yeah. I know that a lot of people use Slack and you can assign tasks, but quite frankly, we just operate solely off WhatsApp. If there is a bit more detail and data and attachments, then we may move that over to an email thread. But we love the WhatsApp web of the world and how many WhatsApp groups are back and forth. And one reason I really do like the WhatsApp groups is if we, for an example, have myself, Ben, and our business manager in a group with an investor, we can kind of all answer a question at any given time. It doesn't matter who it is. And it keeps the conversation going from XP's side so that we're not missing out or losing out on any time. And that's why we love it. We can't always have an external Slack board with external parties, which is why we love WhatsApp groups so much. And that might be with a contractor, that might be with a bank, that might be with our internal team. It might be an internal team within the internal team. We have groups for pretty much anything. And once you get used to them, I think they're super powerful.
Yeah, nice. I think we've obviously grown into the technology being kind of who we are and the sort of era that we've grown up with. But I think I did a similar trip to you, Jack, around the world when I set up Aura. So 2017, so 7 years ago. And even then I was using PDF editing software, marking up drawings, having Skype calls at the time, using it would have been Skype, even messaging. So that would be with internal teams, so communicating with internal teams and actually having video calls from New Zealand, Australia, wherever I was calling back and getting clients on a video call then, because it's just such a powerful way of collaborating and getting things done. So times haven't really changed for us since then. We're still using Zoom, still using Teams, Google Meets for video calls, communicating via WhatsApp, via emails. We've just taken on a PA and we're sort of both, I think, starting to kind of understand the benefits of that and how we can systemize that and give clear instructions to how we want to run the business, how our email management and email inbox needs to be run, and hopefully actually reduce some of the noise, because I know what people are thinking out there, just living on WhatsApp and having all these messages coming in and out. It is quite a lot, and it can be very, very overwhelming. So having a process that kind of eliminates that, or you have people overseeing your inbox and helping you clear it out, for example, is a great way of being a little bit more efficient with that. Cool. So, sorry, I've gone back there.
Hang on, I was just gonna share this, Ben.
Go on.
I don't know if you can see my camera. I took a screenshot the other day.
It's all your notifications, is it?
Because I'm obviously 6 hours behind. I had 61 WhatsApps and 61 emails. So it just goes to show that there's actually almost equal amount of communication via WhatsApp in our group to emails. But there you go.
Yeah, it is a bit mad, and I think I don't know if anyone else listens to Dan Hill's Property Blueprint and a couple of other podcasts like that, but he basically doesn't use technology. He has people that does that for him, and he has people overseeing his inboxes, and people using WhatsApp for himself, or he just doesn't use WhatsApp. And I think that's great. And I think when you get to a certain level, and he's kind of at that level whereby he is effectively kind of CEO and is not really in the operations of the business, and that's great. But fundamentally, Jack and I at the stage of business that we're at needs our input. It needs constant constant oversight. We've whilst we've been over here, we've completed 2 refinances in our social portfolio, and obviously that requires a team, that requires lots of other people helping out. But Jack and I have both been on the emails, on the WhatsApps, phoning brokers, trying to get that over the line this week, and that wouldn't have happened if we weren't so actively involved. So yes, I absolutely love the idea of trimming down all of the communication routes. At the stage of business that we're in, it's just not possible. Cool. So Marlow, the exciting news that I wanted to share with people this week is that we have started work on site, which is great. We've got a contractor on board. He's actually delivered 2 schemes for XP in the past. I think he's delivered 3 or 4 schemes for Central Suites in the past as well. So he's a contractor that we know. I know Jack's dad, when he came around to see our second project that we did with him after 40 years of being in the business, said he's got one of the best finishes in terms of paintwork and general finishes that he's ever seen, which is great. So looking forward to seeing how this one pans out. It's a slightly bigger scheme than what he's taken on before, but he's more than capable of scaling up to take on these 8 units. And for those that haven't seen Marlow, it's a office and dance studio conversion to 8 flats in the center of Marlow. Grade 2 listed building to the front, a nice little muse development that we're super excited to get started on. And the specific topic I actually wanted to talk about with Marlow this week is a bit of a kind of a pain in the ass conversation really I've been having with the lender. We are we're hoping to draw down our first drawdown with the lender soon. So we're putting everything in place to do that, and that includes kind of sending on the JCT contracts, getting collateral warranties in place, sending insurances in, and all this sort of stuff that needs to be ticked before we get any money from them. But I think there's been a big misunderstanding or lack of understanding around some of the insurances that need to be put in place by the contractor. And I just wanted to touch on that because I think it's a good learning curve for people. So typically with a builder, you will have 3 main types of insurances that you'll need from them. There's public liability insurance. So that is something that, scaffolding or some materials are left out in the road, a passerby trips on them, falls, breaks their arm, the liability sits with your builder. He needs public liability to cover those types of events. There's employer's liability insurance, which is basically he's employing people to work on the same site as him. If one of his employees, staff, trips or falls or something, he's responsible, and therefore this insurance is there to cover that. The one that some builders actually don't even need, but in this case they do, and I'll explain why in a minute, is professional indemnity insurance. Now, myself as my architectural practice, or our structural engineer, our mechanical and electrical engineers, they will all have professional indemnity because they are providing professional advice, design advice. And that's the real key thing, it's design advice. So if you provide design advice, get that design advice wrong, i.e. or specify the incorrect acoustic boarding, and it fails our acoustic tests, noise tests on site, that can come back to Aura as a claim because we've professionally given incorrect advice. Now, that's all great. Why would a builder need professional indemnity for design advice? Well, in JCT contracts, in any building contract, there is often an element of what's called a contractor design portion. Now, most of the time in our schemes, it's the MEP. So we don't specify exactly what boiler we're going to put in, how those systems connect to the radiators, or we don't specify what the electrical wiring is within the building. We might performance specify something, but more often than what happens, unless we've got a separate mechanical and electrical engineer consultant on board to design and specify all of the relevant systems, what we would normally do is make it a contractor design portion, a CDP, and that means that basically the builder's heating engineer, for example, is designing the system, designing the boiler to work with the relevant rads and the relevant valves and all this stuff, and it's over to them to design. So realistically, the professional indemnity insurance that a builder may need is just to cover those CDP elements. Now, I'll get to the point now in terms of why it's been a frustrating week for me, because our lender is asking our builder to get professional indemnity for the full cost of the building works. Now, just think about that. If the build costs are £600,000, for example, what can a builder specify, or a heating engineer from a design perspective specify, that could go wrong that would cost us £600,000 to rectify? I can't think of anything. I'd love to know if anyone can think of anything. But realistically, if a build contract is 600 grand and the contractor design portion is pushed onto the contractor for the M&E kit, let's say worst comes to worst, they've specified the wrong electrical wiring. Okay, well, they have to reinstate and rip out all of that wiring, new sockets, new fuse boards, whatever. That might be 80 grand, 100 grand of that 600 grand build contract. And that's really what this professional indemnity is for. So I didn't really see any reason why the contractor needs any more than £100,000 professional indemnity. But we got a bit of pushback from the lender. They want the professional indemnity to be equal to the total build cost, which I think is absolutely ludicrous. I will be talking to them about this next week, just to try and explain the position and as to why I don't think it's correct. Would love to know if anyone else has got any insight into that, because it feels bonkers. Jack, have you heard of that before?
I haven't, no. But I mean, I think the sentiment of what you're saying is, don't just take for let's say someone requests something, don't just take that for what it is. Always question why and negotiate. We do that quite frequently when we get a valuation done on a building, and the valuer thinks all of a sudden it's going to cost £350 a square foot to rebuild that building, and then you need your property cover to cover what the valuation has said for the lender. We always negotiate down to what it realistically is going to be rebuild the building. Obviously, you need that to be enough. So if it does burn down, you've got a facility large enough to rebuild the building in that instance. But we find that valuers often overinflate that. So challenging that is worthwhile. And also things like flood cover and insurance. We also ask why they definitely need it. Marlow is next to a river, so it's kind of understandable, but we've pushed back on one recently that was completely outside of anywhere near of any water, which was actually in Croydon. And just for listeners out there, this site we're discussing is Marlow, and we actually did a bit of a summary on the day that we completed on that site, which is episode 48. So that's series 148, if anyone wants to check it out.
Nice. People might be thinking, like, why do I even care? Because fundamentally it's the builder that's paying for this insurance. So it's not, whether the premiums are grand or £3,000, it's no real skin off our nose. But for me, it's about principle, really. Like, fundamentally, I don't agree with the approach. I think it's wrong, and actually it's costing our builder more than it needs to, and delaying things because he's then got to go back to a broker. What frustrates me a little bit is that the lender is also speaking to their solicitor and asking their solicitor for advice. Well, why does the solicitor any conveyancing solicitor or development finance solicitor, what do they know about professional indemnity insurance for builders? Very, very little, in my opinion. I suggest that it should really be the monitoring surveyor and a building surveyor that sort of understands that process more and should be advising. But anyway, it's been I've been banging my head against a brick wall really, but we'll see how it goes next week when I sort of have a chat with them. Cool. Making offers, leaving some in the tank.
Leaving some in the tank. So we got an offer out yesterday or the day before on a site in XP. Lovely, nice site in coincidentally Abingdon, one of our favourite places on the earth. And it's a nice little development site. Ben hasn't seen it yet, but if we do get a nibble on the offer, he'll be the first person looking at it because it's quite complicated and the value add is really difficult to really get our head around and unlocking. But anyway, the principle of what I wanted to talk about today is when you're offering and leaving some in the tank. I had this chat with Aaron when we're putting this offer forward. Pretty much within reason, every single time we ever make an offer, I will expect the seller to try and get us up. And that's just fundamentals of splitting the difference, negotiating. And we're normally, it's very rare that we actually are at the expectations or above a vendor's value of a building. So we're normally starting to have that negotiation conversation, which I'll come on to a little bit later when you're on the other side as a negotiator. But from offering on a building, there's two things that I wanted to sort of analyze when saying leaving some in the tank. If you know you're going to be in a negotiation conversation, make sure you don't put your very, very best foot forward. And this has served us really well in a number of occasions. One, when they come back and renegotiate, you can gesture some value uplift and they feel like they've been completed and they feel wholesome that they've negotiated you well. And sometimes that's just an ego thing. But two, if you're part of a sealed bidding process or a process where there's multiple bidders and you get called in for another round of bidding, it doesn't look great if you can't put any more on the bid that you're in. We have been in a situation where we've bid our absolute maximum. We've got called in second round of biddings and we've just been polite and said, we really pushed it as far as we could. This is where we're at. But leaving some in the tank might be the difference that you need. And don't be afraid to ask where you think it needs to be, whether it's an agent compiling those bids to put it together. And then the second part of leaving some in the tank is managing expectations of the seller that you have got nothing else left in the tank. And what that looks like is exactly the offer that we've put forward this week. So the vendor's expectations are here. We're slightly below the vendor's expectations, and we don't want to go into a back and forth negotiation. So what we have done is we've laid the land with the owner and we've said, look, we're actually 50K below where we're putting forward, but we just want to get this done. We don't have any more negotiation in this. This is our best price. It's that or nothing. And what you're preventing there is that conversation where they're trying to tease you up, because that conversation can sometimes be difficult because they'll come back and you say that, that's where we're at. So we're preempting that. So it's that or nothing. And that is another technique we use when we're trying to get the best foot forward and to not negotiate and go backwards and forwards on this, that, and the other. So that's it. So two forms of leaving something in the tank: one, actually doing it, and two, managing expectations so that they know you are not going to increase your value.
Nice. Very good. So next project update that I wanted to give everyone is on Muswell Hill. We are still in a party wall pain scenario where for those that haven't been keeping up to date on this, we submitted our party wall, I think in November, awards. It's been back and forth. We've got one particularly prickly neighbour whereby we're digging quite a big basement, so there's quite a lot of structural engineering and design gone into that. Now, they're perfectly obliged to do this, but it's still a pain in the ass regardless. But they have asked for a third-party structural engineer to review our engineers' designs and details. You can imagine what that's going to do. It's going to cost us a fortune because they're not obliged to use the cheapest engineer they can find. They're just obliged to use a structural engineer that they find, and we have to suck it up and put up with it. But also there's the time frame, trying to get that person instructed. What happened with ours is that he went on holiday for 2 weeks, nothing got done. Now he's back, he's raised questions. Now it's going back and forth between our engineers. And all that time, we can't dig, in the areas that we want to dig. The contractors are having to start in other areas on the site, which they are now starting to do. Steel has been ordered and is being delivered next week, so they can start actually knocking around the upper levels and demolishing parts, installing steelwork, whilst we're waiting for the party wall agreements to start the basement dig. Yeah, it's been a bit of a nightmare, really. We haven't really been able to go as gung-ho as we want to on this project because of the various approvals that we need in place. But we're getting closer. At least we've heard back from the third-party engineer and things are progressing. So TBC, hopefully I won't be pulling my hair out for watching that.
And I just sent a photo of a party wall that I just seen in Peru. I don't know if you can share it.
Oh, wow. Nice. Are they just built up on that? Let me just share my screen then.
So it's a house and obviously a commercial office.
I love that you're looking at all the buildings on holiday rather than. Is that? Can you see that?
Like, why are you taking? Yeah, there you go. He's like, why are you taking a photo of that? And I was like, that is a house and a commercial building on the right hand side.
Nice. That's quite the party wall. I mean, I doubt they very much have party wall agreements in Peru, do they?
Yeah, well, you'd expect windows on. You'd expect windows on that sort of.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
Wall, I suppose, if there wasn't anything.
Nice. One thing before you jump into analyze. Yeah, any business with a photo of Gordon Ramsay. I actually didn't know Gordon Ramsay was a professional football player.
Semi-professional.
Oh, I see. So he was shit.
Yeah.
Got it.
But he's
analysing any business.
So this is more for business owners and anyone that's running a product, a service, a property business, whatever it may be. For us, essential suites of room or drawings for the client. And I can't help it, but every time I pay for something, even on holidays, so my example in this is I went to dinner in a restaurant and the restaurant was actually owned by the same restaurant owner, but they had 3 different types of restaurants. One was like modern cuisine, one was Peruvian, and then one was more of a steak and seafood restaurant. And we actually ate in every single one of them because we liked the first one so much. But the sort of what I wanted to portray out there for anyone is that picture yourself as a consumer or a client of yourself, if that makes sense, and analyze it from that perspective, because I feel that it's quite often, even in our surveying business, we're always trying to do it as quickly and as cost effectively as possible and adapting the drawings to an architect. But actually we've got the advantage that Ben can tap into what an architectural mind would look like. But if you didn't have that, picture yourself as an architect. What do you want? What's good for you? What benefits do our products bring you? And you start analysing every different thing of that business or service. So this Peruvian dinner that we went for, we was looking at the service, the greeting as you go in, how charismatic the person is that you're ordering with. And what they're recommending for you to eat, even down to the hygiene, even down to the toilets, even down to the options of drinks, even down to the options of where you're seated, even the music, the ambience, all of those things, and think how that you can improve every sort of element of that, and kind of try and be a bit negative because it will create more value, and go all the way through the process. And at the end, you'll have loads of actions to iterate and change and tweak. And it's not always easy to get that from a customer or client. The amount of surveys you might put out and get one response where they quickly guided it through. That's why it's sometimes good to have a client as a friend, so that you can get them to go through the end-to-end business and say, what did you think? Is there anything we could have done differently? But yeah, just putting yourself in the shoes of a consumer to see what you think and be critical, and also don't be afraid to use someone else as a sort of test code to do that. And that's just sort of how my mind works and what I thought. And the downside to all of these restaurants were napkins. I think the napkins really let the restaurant down because it was quite a high-end, nice restaurant, but I felt like we had toilet roll on our table in every single restaurant. So for me, I think that just a napkin change would have been the most cost-effective, impactful change, given that they got everything else so right. And that was the reason that Gordon Ramsay's in front of us is because if any of you watched Kitchen Nightmares or Hell's Kitchen, Gordon Ramsay is very, very good at getting to the point of the issue James Sinclair is very good at that as well, analysing the issue and getting straight to that, because that's the first, biggest, most effective thing to change. And sometimes you've got to be the Gordon Ramsay, talking to yourself in the mirror and going, what the F are you doing? The problems are fundamentals, and you sometimes need to snap out of that and get better napkins. And that's it.
Nice. I bet Kelly loves going on holiday with you, thinking about all these things. I think the big thing out of what you just said is, as a business owner, you kind of want criticism or you want negative feedback, because those are the things that you need to focus on the most to make the biggest change. So I think people sort of shy away from that. We've actually I saw Graham do it earlier, and to be honest, I didn't know we had one. The team have set up a feedback page on our website to gather feedback from our clients. It's not always roses, and fundamentally most businesses aren't. The aim of the game is to continuously improve. So if we've let someone down, or there's some negative feedback, or things didn't go as well as they could have done, we want to know about it so that we can improve it for the next time. So yeah, I think that's just so important within any business. Movement is life. Thank you very much for watching, for one, and also for your question coming in. How do you know if it was actually the neighbour causing delays in the party wall process, or is it the party wall surveyor making more fees for themselves? I mean, it might well be, but I've basically, even during our planning permission process, had a video call with this particular neighbour. I've seen the objections in the planning process from this particular neighbour, and I can pretty much guarantee that it's, I can understand that people want to protect themselves as much as they possibly can, but I can almost guarantee that the party wall surveyor said to them that there's nothing really untoward here. The engineer's design looks fine. We're not digging within like 2 meters of the neighbouring property. There's temporary props in place. It's retaining walls, underpinning. It's very standard construction. So to get a third party engineer on board feels like it's massively OTT from my perspective, but I guess we will never know. It is what it is. One thing that I did want to touch on that, though, because it's interesting that that's the viewpoint, and I get this a lot from people that maybe don't run service-based businesses, and obviously running XP surveys. We're generally pretty busy within those businesses. When something comes along whereby it's disrupting our program of works and we're having to change our resource to cope with it, even if it's additional fee, it's still a pain. And I would actually much prefer just doing a job, moving on to the next one, and understanding the resourcing within the business. I think there is a bit of a false, not a false economy, but maybe a bit of a myth from people that use professional services providers that we're just greedy and we want to come for more fee. And I think the reality is the opposite. Like, as a service provider myself, it's often less profitable, more of a disruption to the company to drag things out, because fundamentally there's uncertainty there, basically. And yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, because I'm a professional, who's just typed in. Yeah, but maybe, and there are some people out there that maybe aren't as good at the marketing, don't have a good pipeline of work, are scratching around, and do want to just charge extra for that. Maybe that's my naivety, because I feel like we provide a good service. But that's my sort of my take from a business owner that runs service provider with businesses, that actually it can be more of a disruption to start coming back for more fee and negotiating and disrupting everything within the business. So
I think the difficulty with a party wall surveyor is always who's paying. So for an example, using our surveying business, we don't want to overcharge our architects because we want them to keep coming back to us. So if they're the person that we're using and they're seeking the benefit of the efficiency and the cost, whereas a party wall surveyor, that cost does get offset to us, so they can kind of do what they want to do and meander through the process, because whether they're slow, indifferent or expensive is not really the neighbour's issue, it's our issue. So there is a conflict there. So might be quite right.
Thanks for the question. And if you've got any more questions, do let us know. These videos do go out on podcasts on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, or your standard podcasting platforms. If you get value from this, please share it with just one person. You can rate us on Spotify, and you can leave a review on Apple Music. The more reviews and good ratings we get, the more the platforms will share it out with people that are likely to be similar to you, wanting to grow their business, wanting to understand more about property development, property investment. So do spread the good word. We want to spread this as wide and as far as we possibly can. Cool. More fun you've been having negotiating in Peru.
Yes, it's very Peru topical, but it's all relative stuff to business and business negotiating. I did a business negotiation episode. I'll have to dig out the episode and put it in the comments, where I actually got referred to by a friend as Donald, the real life younger Donald Trump, which I'm not sure I'm quite am on negotiation well, but I love negotiating and I love all of the nuances and elements that go into it. But I had a very apt and relative 2 examples of negotiating, which I wanted to share with the audience that are replicable in business. And the main one, it was actually negotiating purchasing this hat, which, as you can see, this is llama leather. Sorry, vegans or whatever they are that probably won't like that. And the long and short of it is I probably walked through 1,000 market stalls and saw 1,000 hats, but there was one that I really wanted, and that was a full-on leather, or fake leather if the eco warriors are there, hat. And annoyingly, if I wanted to buy one of the other hats, my negotiation power could have been so much stronger, because I could have just walked away and got them to the very bottom value and bought one from 2 stores up. But this one, I had to pretend that it wasn't valuable to me, even though it was the only one after searching for days that was fully leather, because I really knew that that was the only one out of the many, many hats that I've ever seen. But anyway, so the role play goes, I'm in the shop, I'm negotiating on price. I can't remember the exact values, but the vendor was something along the lines of 300 soles, which is about 60 quid. And I was less than half of that. And I had to be prepared to go, no, it's right, fine, I won't buy it then, and walk away. And my wife knew that it was super valuable, because we had searched high and low for this hat. And she almost gave the ghost away and almost ruined our negotiation position, and said, but don't you really want this one? Looked at me and I said, no, I don't. And as I was walking away, I said, she'll stop me in a minute. And as I got to the corner of her shop, walking to her friend's stand, which had all the hats in the world, but not this full leather one, she said, okay, I'll do it for your price. And that was the power of being able to walk away. And I was very nervous doing that, because I really did want the hat. But the principle is, in business, it makes negotiation is so much easier if you have another option. And that's why tendering is good. Let's say you're fitting out a property for a full set of windows, make sure you get more than one price. Create that other option, so that your negotiation for the one that you do want can be a lot easier, whether that's price, quality, or speed. And another example of this is when we were walking out the terminal, landing it in Lima here, we got offered a lady was stood there and offered us a taxi service, and it was 60 soles. And I didn't know whether that was double what it should be or half of what it should be. So I quickly got up Uber, did the same journey on Uber, and it coincidentally was about the same price. So for the convenience, we went with the taxi service that was in front of us. And that's an example of when you get a second option or another option, it gives you a lot more power to either make a decision or negotiate to make a decision. Hope everyone enjoyed those 2 scenarios. And the real moral of the story is, I've got my hat, and I've actually
got a lovely hat.
I've actually got very authentic, Inca sort of stone
band
feature to go around it, which will be done at some point.
Nice. I remember when Laura and I were looking in Clapham to rent our first property together, and this was before the times of it being, on the market yesterday, sold today, rented today. So, I felt like we could still negotiate a little bit at that time. And I went in saying, look, just play it cool, just leave it to me. I'll kind of negotiate, sort it out. And as we were coming out of this place we both really loved, she goes to the guy, I'll take it. I'll offer full asking, full rental price. And we ended up basically paying more than what I thought we should do for this rental. But it's definitely a skill and an art. And Jack's very, very good at it. So I'd imagine you got a pretty good deal on that hat. Cool, good stuff. So point number 9, shareholders agreements. And I'm going to start with a thank you, actually, which is to somebody that we've spoken about on this podcast before, a guy called Josh Keegan. He is the ultimate FD. He's helped us with XP's bookkeeping and accountancy. He's helped Central Suites with their bookkeeping accountancy, putting systems and processes in place to help us provide cash flow forecasting, helping out with our, all of the accounting needs that we've got for a growing business like ours. But if you haven't listened to his podcast, it's called The Ultimate FD. I think I've listened to every episode since it started. There's one out every Sunday. And it's something that I tune into every Monday morning on my way to work. And I'm bringing this up because it was the latest episode called "It's Not You, It's Me," which was all about shareholders agreements. And every now and again, he'll bring in a guy called Tej Gill. Shout out to Tej as well, who is a chartered tax accountant. And they talk about all things tax, which might not sound interesting, but when you're a business owner running numerous businesses, the last thing you want to be doing is giving away more tax than you have to the tax man. And this whole episode was on shareholders agreements. Now, what I'm asking you to do is go over there and listen to it, because I'm not going to have an hour to spend kind of running through the whole ins and outs of it. But I wanted to briefly touch upon the importance of having it. And what are they, I guess? So when you set up a company, typically, you'll have directors of the business, but you'll also have shareholders within that business. Now, a business, when it's set up, will typically, when your accountant is setting it up, for example, will have what's called articles of association. Those are normally pretty standard, unless you've maybe got a property business where it might have something more specifically property written into those articles. And what the articles are for, unless they're modified significantly, they are to sort of safeguard and give clear instructions of how the company, how the business operates, and all of the intricacies around the business and what should happen if X, Y, or Z happens to the business, responsibilities and more sort of legal stuff around that business structure. What that doesn't do necessarily is give clear guidance and understanding about how the shareholders operate. So Jack and I, for example, are 50-50 shareholding in XP Property. A shareholders agreement will be more about us as directors, us as shareholders, and how in any eventuality things play out. Now, things are great. We've been in business for 7 years. In 10 years' time, things might be completely different. It may be that Jack wants to go off and live in Peru and be a llama farmer, for example. I might want to start off with my kids and sort of wind down the business, for example. Well, a shareholders agreement is there to kind of help stipulate some of those things. And in property, another great example is if you've got a 50-50 joint venture with someone, you're both 50-50 shareholding, a shareholders agreement between your JV partner and you will help outline things such as, okay, well, we intended to keep this property or this development as an investment property. What happens if things change and we actually want to sell it? But what if the investor wants to sell it and we don't as XP Property? So the shareholders agreement, before you get to that point, will help outline the things in which you need to think about and how that issue is resolved. I.e., it might be that if one party wants to sell and you don't, maybe it's put to the open market, and if we get 3 estate agents give us 3 values, if we get a sales price that's within 2% of that average, that's when it does actually sell and the sell goes through. These are just some examples of the types of things that you might want to put into a shareholders agreement, but basically they are there to protect and foresee any eventuality that might happen in the future when things are all rosy, things are great, but when shit hits the fan or people have change of heart, change of life circumstances, you want to have a really, really robust agreement set out from the start that governs all of those issues as they arrive, if they do arrive, and it no longer becomes an emotional kind of turmoil of potential disagreements, but it becomes a rigid, this is what we said in our shareholders agreement, therefore this is how this needs to play out. Yes, there are things like arbitration and if things can't be resolved, there should be a deadlock resolution within your shareholders agreement that states this is the process if there is a deadlock and we can't actually come to a formal agreement outside of what's already agreed in the shareholders agreement. Does that make sense, Jack? Is that sort of explained?
Yeah, it does. And I just also want to touch on something that shareholders agreements are super important. We have them in every, even between us and investors or whatever it may be, joint venture partners, JVs with builders, whatever it is. One thing that's really important is even though the shareholders agreement is there and in place and sets the parameters of things if they go wrong, right, or indifferent, you can override that by mutual agreement further down the line. So Ben mentioned if one party's view changes, but if both parties' view changes for something different, then you can definitely sort of get your heads together and pull that decision together and override the shareholders agreement and to actually make an agreement beyond that. So it can be edited with the parties. Another thing that I wanted to say on shareholders agreement, which we've done in Central Suites, because we own a portfolio with an investor, is we have one shareholders agreement in the limited company that operates for all of the projects underneath that shareholders agreement. And then we have a supporting project summary, which is basically acquisition price, refurb costs, refinance value, rental income. What that enables us to do is we don't have to go back into legals just to buy a new property. We send them the project summary, and then it feeds into the overarching shareholders agreement. So a super efficient way of growing a multiple project business as well.
Nice. And I can't recommend the UFD podcast enough. Head over if you want a full detailed breakdown of really, from a qualified tax accountant, how these shareholders agreements should be arranged. And this doesn't have to be done at the start of the project, by the way. If Jack and I, 7 years into the business, wanted to put one of these in place, having not done it in the past, we can absolutely do that. So do head over to the UFD podcast to find out the full details. And that's just about it from this week. Thanks for everyone who's tuned in. Movement is like, I don't know your full name. I just know your YouTube handle, but thank you very much for tuning in. Anything else you wanted to say before we dart off?
No. See you next week. I'll be back on English soil. Don't know about you, Ben.
No, I will still be out here. So yeah, I'll be probably in the same place next week. But thanks for tuning in for those that have, and see you again at 5 p.m. as we resume the normality next week. Thanks, everyone.
Sorry we were late. See you next week.
Yeah.